The entire story of child sacrifice that they keep feeding you is clearly a lie, and what I'm about to show you is barely even the tip of the spear of the incredibly overwhelming amount of evidence in support of what I'm trying to tell you.
As we saw them, it promised them that they would live forever. They sacrificed their children.
Now, this scene is crucial in so many different ways for us to understand why all of it, the entire narrative, and I mean all of it, is clearly a lie. Because what I want you to do right now is to ask yourself a very, very simple question. Was the egg that we see being used by the man in yellow to revive and resurrect Roger sacrificed by the hen that laid it? The answer is clearly no. And anybody who says anything else is clearly insane. It did not matter that the egg was obviously stolen from the hen that laid it through force by the man in yellow. There was no trade, there was no arrangement, there was no deal of any kind with anybody at any point. And this is undeniable fact. But yet, the man in yellow was still able to use that egg to create a revenant zombie out of Roger. The reason that I need you to understand this is that we have seen the same exact thing happening 2 different times in the show with the same exact character, and that is obviously Fatima. Anybody trying to say that Fatima is the type of absolute scum that would sacrifice a child to a demon for immortality has completely butchered her character, and her honor as a human being must be defended. Fatima did not make any deal of any kind with anybody at any point. But yet, the man in yellow was able to steal her fertilized egg, just like with the fertilized egg from the hen that was used to reanimate Roger, that was already in Fatima's body, to bring Smiley back to life. And we know that her egg was fertilized before Smiley was brought back through her body because Fatima was already pregnant before Smiley was killed by Boyd. Basically, what I'm saying here is there is no difference of any kind between what Fatima experienced and what the man in yellow did to the hen who laid the egg that he used to revive Roger. The chicken did not make a deal with the man in yellow, and neither did Fatima. And even if you want to come up with some ridiculous excuse like that situation was somehow different because Smiley probably made a deal when he was supposedly human, or maybe Roger made a deal like Clara at some unspecified time in the past, no, both of those excuses completely fall apart when you look at what is happening to Fatima right now as we speak. She is being transformed into a monster by this place and the entity controlling it, despite the fact that Fatima, once again, has never made any deal with anyone or anything in this place. But yet, she is still being transformed into something that is either very similar to the Nightwalkers, the Ankui children, or to the man in yellow himself. Either way, the conclusion remains the exact same. This place has the ability to force you to transform into a literal monster regardless of whether you have committed child sacrifice or made a deal of any kind whatsoever, as we can clearly see with what's going on with Fatima right now. So with this literal and undeniable fact in your mind, what does that tell you about the narrative that we have been led to believe, which is that the Nightwalkers sacrificed their children to become what they are today? It tells you that it is a lie, a ploy, a sham, and therefore that the entire thing is a scam, which is why you really need to pay attention to the scene that I'm about to show you.
You always tell me how lonely you are in there. It wasn't my choice to be this way.
They touch, they break, they steal. No one here is free.
What we've been seeing throughout the entirety of the season is that the writers have been slowly laying the foundation and groundwork for one of the biggest reveals in the entire show. That the Nightwalkers that have been torturing us since the moment we first entered the town were never these comically evil and demonic people who sacrificed their children just so they could spend 500 years torturing random people every night and the rest of their time sleeping in these damp, dirty-ass caves like we had been led to believe in the previous seasons. The reality of the situation is that the Nightwalkers themselves are no more in control of their lives than the characters we've been following throughout the story. Just like Roger and just like Fatima, the Nightwalkers themselves were more than likely forcefully transformed into what they are today. And more than likely, the narrative that they sacrificed their children is probably entirely false. And as we can tell from the clothing of the man in young Tabitha's visions, which conclusively limits that period to being at least the late 1800s, it's very clear that the Nightwalkers were created long after the creation of Fromland itself, which has clearly been in existence since at least the colonial period from the 1700s. And based off of the 1506 date in the lighthouse, fair to say it's probably been here long before even then. And there are many other signs supporting that the narrative of the Nightwalkers being created as a result of the sacrifice of the 7 children Jade sees depicted in his vision in the underground tunnels is clearly a lie. Like, first of all, the official name of the Nightwalkers is nightmare creatures. In other words, monsters extracted from a nightmare, which is the same thing that the giant doll monsters from the cabins have also been confirmed to be. There is also the fact that there are way too many Nightwalkers relative to the 7 children whom Jade saw in that vision, which was likely just implanted into his brain by this place and the entity. There's also the other problem, which I don't see anybody talking about whatsoever, which is that as of season 4 episode 9, it is now officially confirmed that there are 14 different Ankui children in the entire show, excluding the boy in white. And the excuse that they were named that way because the previous actors got too old is ridiculous. Like, think about this for a second, okay? When Henry Cavill left The Witcher, the character he played was recasted with a new actor. And guess what? The name of the character he was playing did not suddenly change from Geralt to being, I don't know, Richard or some shit. It did not change. The character's name stayed the same, even though it's a different actor. Because that's what happens when you recast a character. The name doesn't change. So basically what I'm saying here is that the 7 new Ankui children that we're seeing in the show are completely different characters from the ones we've already been seeing throughout the entire show, which is something that you can see just by literally looking at them, and you will notice that they are not the same children we've been seeing throughout the show. And even if you want to ignore that, there is still the fact that the children that Jade did actually see were not tied down to the 7 slabs, and they were clearly very, very happy and smiling despite the fact that they were supposedly being unwillingly sacrificed to a demon. And in combination with how we now know for a fact that this place can turn you into a monster regardless of whether or not you have made a deal, because of Roger and Fatima, that can only mean one or two different things. Either all of the Ankui children are evil and are just fake visions being sent by the entity to deceive the people of the town, or that there have been 2 different occasions in Fromville where 7 children have been sacrificed for one reason or another, who knows. Ultimately, the main point that I'm trying to make here is that we are being played and deceived by this place. Something that you are going to understand very, very well once you watch this next scene.
The dolls, they were mine. I was playing with them. Shh. A man came and took them from me. He said they gave him nightmares, so he threw them in the lake. But one day the man died. His nightmares came out of the lake.
Now, this scene right here is a perfect representation of exactly the point that I'm trying to make here. That everything we have been led to believe to be true up to this point in the story has been not only a lie, but that the entire narrative of From, that the Nightwalkers were created as a result of them sacrificing their children for immortality, is clearly just a deception designed by the entity in control of the monsters. Because what I really want you to notice here, first and foremost, is that the clothing of the man who took the dolls from young Tabitha is clearly from an era that existed at least 100 to 150 years after the era that the colonial version of Jade existed in. The reason why you really need to understand this is that it directly contradicts Victor's statement in season 4 that the soul of the person that Tabitha is reincarnated from, that we have been led to believe was there at the original child sacrifice that created the Nightwalkers, is always summoned into the town with a boy and a girl as her children. Because we literally see that there was a version of Tabitha conclusively that was brought into the town as a child all the way back in what is at least the 1800s, if not even the 1900s. And I really want you to look at the clothing of the man who took the dolls from the young version of Tabitha. Because whatever it is that you want to believe, the fact of the matter is this person that we see here could not have existed in Fromland before the mid to late 1800s. And that is just a fact, which logically means that he was in Fromland possibly even a century after the colonial version of Jade. The reason why this matters so much is that this is just one of the many inconsistencies that we see with both the reincarnation and the child sacrifice narrative that is being pushed by this place and the entity into the minds of the people who are living in this town. Like, just watch this scene and you will see for yourself.
They have the right idea, of course, but how you do something is just as important as what you do. This place, it's built on ritual.
What we see here from the man in yellow is one of the most important pieces of dialogue in the entire show. Because what this scene really tells us is that there is no difference of any kind between Fatima, Roger, the giant dolls, and the Nightwalkers. Even when you look at Smiley's resurrection, Elgin was told to feed Fatima his blood so that the demonic baby could be born. And when you look at what's happening to Fatima right now, the man in yellow sent Clara to infect her with his blood so that Fatima could be transformed into a monster. All of them are monsters that were created in the same exact way, i.e. through the use of rituals. There was no agreement. There was no deal, because what you are looking at here is simply blood magic. Basically, what I'm saying here is that the reason why Elgin and Tabitha were able to kill the giant doll monster, but Kenny failed to kill the Nightwalker when he attempted it himself, is because the milkman turned around right before he got hit, so that he wouldn't get stabbed in the back by the voodoo totem. And how we know this for a fact is very, very simple. Think back to what happened when we saw Randall holding up the talismans to the Nightwalkers. What did they say to Randall? They told him, "It doesn't work that way, sweetie." But yet, we clearly see that the talismans actually do have an effect on the Nightwalkers as long as you hang them in the walls of an enclosed location. And the reason for that is very simple. This place is built on rituals. How you do something is just as important as what you do. And this directly ties into the scene that I'm about to show you.
Let go, Martin. My blood is your blood now. My blood is your blood now.
What we are seeing here matters a lot, because what is actually being established here is that the reason both Elgin and Tabitha were able to kill those respective monsters with the voodoo totems, while Kenny himself failed with the milkman, is not because there's anything special about Tabitha or Elgin. It's actually because they stabbed them in the back when they weren't looking. In Fromland, the method is just as important as what you do. This explains how the man in yellow was able to steal a fertilized egg from Fatima to resurrect Smiley, just like he was able to steal the fertilized egg from the hen to turn Roger into a monster. It's the same exact ritual. Basically, what the writers are really trying to say here is that everything that the man in yellow can do, the people in the town are also capable of doing. That's how Boyd was able to use the same exact blood magic ritual that the old man in the dungeon used on him on Smiley. But because Smiley is undead, or whatever he is or may not be, the result was completely different. This was also the same exact season where we saw Boyd story walking by using the torch. Once again, echoing the same theme as before, that using the right ritual is far more important than any particular individual. This could also obviously tie into the tagline of this season being, "Become what you fear and fear what you become." Boyd himself will likely have to start using blood magic in order to defeat the man in yellow. And unlike with Smiley, he's probably going to have to sacrifice every bit of blood that is currently in his body to kill the man in yellow. Basically, what I'm saying right now is that everyone who said that Boyd resurrecting Donna from the heart attack was something extremely similar to the man in yellow waking up the priest, you are likely correct. And the philosophical concept of Elgin and Tabitha having to resort to becoming backstabbers because the monsters in this place forced them to do it is very interesting to me, and might actually be more significant than you think, as it directly brings me into the scene that I'm about to show you.
You're Clara.
Yeah.
Do you know who I really am?
Yeah.
Maybe if you look closer.
Oh, God.
Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would. You know who I am? Oh, you haven't remembered that part yet.
Now, what we see here is that just like we saw with the man in yellow asking Tabitha if she knew who he was, we also saw the yellow man asking Clara a very, very similar line of questioning. And this is interesting to me because we have seen that Clara had previously made a deal in the hope that she would be allowed to leave this place at some point. And one of the most popular theories in this community has always been that Victor's mom, who we have been led to believe is the person Tabitha is reincarnated from, made a deal for Victor to be protected. So the man in yellow saying Tabitha doesn't remember that part yet could easily tie into Tabitha eventually remembering that she herself made a deal with the man in yellow while she was Victor's mom, or she made a deal with some other entity that he may be working for in one of her past lives. Or maybe even more simply, she and Jade were the ones who sacrificed 7 children for immortality, and that could even be the reason why they keep reincarnating to this day. And perhaps the deal she made as Victor's mom was that if she was able to make it into the borrow tree before they caught her, she would be allowed to leave this place with her family. But if they caught her, then she would be eaten alive in front of her family, and that could tie into why she wasn't wearing a white dress in Tabitha's memory of her being caught by Smiley, but she was wearing a white dress in Victor's drawing of her being eaten by the Man in Yellow. And I've always questioned whether or not the Man in Yellow is the creator of the Nightwalkers or not. But thinking about the fertilized chicken egg and Roger and how the same thing clearly had to have happened to Fatima with Smiley's rebirth, it's definitely hard to ignore the similarities. And when you look at how he's now transforming Fatima into a monster, it definitely seems likely that the Man in Yellow is also the creator of the Nightwalkers. I definitely have to thank Rotor for this video right here where he talked about the milkman specifically turning around before Kenny could have stabbed him with the voodoo totem, because that's something that I did notice, but I never would have given it much thought if he didn't point out how Elgin and Tabitha were also both backstabbers in that video. And if we eventually see somebody like Clara or Sarah killing one of the Nightwalkers by stabbing them in the back, it'll be pretty much confirmed. However, what's most important here is there were some very crazy things happening in the trailer for season 4 episode 10, which is the season finale. So go watch this video right here to see my thoughts on how the Nightwalkers bypassed the talismans and ended up getting into the chamber with the bones, and of course Jade and Tabitha.